The vote was unanimous. 12 ancient beings raised their clawed hands in agreement. And with that simple gesture, they condemned an entire species to extinction. High Arbiter Solace watched his fellow council members with cold satisfaction. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed empires, and turned proud civilizations into obedient servants. No species had ever truly challenged them. Until now. The humans continue to resist, Counselor Mira reported, her scaled face showing something that might have been admiration. We have burned 6 of their colony worlds. We have blockaded their trade routes. We have assassinated their leaders. And still they fight. They are insects, another counselor spat. Their technology is primitive. Their lifespans are pathetically short. How do they continue? Solace had studied the humans carefully. He understood what his peers did not. The humans were not strong because of their weapons or their ships. They were strong because they simply refused to accept defeat. They adapted. They improvised. They turned every loss into a lesson and every lesson into a new way to hurt their enemies. It was, Solace admitted privately, almost impressive. But impressive or not, they had to die. Traditional methods have failed, Solace announced. Occupation costs too many resources. Direct extermination would take centuries. We need a different solution. Mira leaned forward. There is one option we have not considered. The Nethkai. Silence fell over the chamber. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Nethkai were a mistake. 2,000 years ago, Dominion scientists had engineered the perfect biological weapon. Living machines designed to consume organic matter, grow stronger with each kill, and adapt to any defense within hours. They were meant to be the ultimate tool of conquest. Instead, they had nearly destroyed everything. It took 500 years and the sacrifice of 3 entire fleets to contain the Nethkai. They were sealed beneath a dead moon at the edge of Dominion space, locked in stasis fields that required constant maintenance. Every Dominion child learned about them as a warning against arrogance. And now Mira was suggesting they be released. You cannot be serious, a counselor whispered. I'm completely serious, Mira replied. The humans are dangerous precisely because they adapt, but the Nethkai adapt faster. They will consume Earth and every human colony within a standard year. The problem will be solved permanently. And what happens when the Nethkai turn on us? Another asked. Mira smiled. They will not. Our scientists have spent centuries studying them. The Nethkai hunt based on chemical signatures. They target species that evolved in stable, peaceful environments. Soft species. The Dominion evolved on harsh worlds. Our biochemistry is incompatible with their feeding process. They will ignore us completely. Solace considered this. The humans came from a world called Earth. His intelligence reports classified it as a Category 7 death world. Extreme temperature variations, constant tectonic activity, predators in every ecosystem. By all logic, humans should have the same harsh biochemistry as the Dominion. But logic had failed them before when dealing with humans. The risk is acceptable, Solace decided. Release the Nethkai. Target the human colonies first. Let us see if their famous adaptability can save them from this. The vote was taken. The decision was made. Deep beneath a moon that had not seen sunlight in 2 millennia, ancient systems began to fail. Containment fields that had held strong for countless generations flickered once, twice, and then went dark. In the silence that followed, something stirred. The first Nethkai to wake was a small thing, barely larger than a human hand. Its body was a nightmare blend of metal and flesh, with too many legs and a mouth that opened in directions that should not exist. It had been sleeping for so long that it had forgotten what hunger felt like. Now it remembered. The creature raised its head and let out a sound that was not quite a scream and not quite a signal. Others heard it. Others woke. Within hours, thousands of Nethkai were moving through the tunnels of their ancient prison, testing the walls, searching for a way out. They found it. A transport ship waited in orbit. Dominion soldiers watched nervously as the creatures poured into the cargo holds. Their orders were clear. Deliver the Neth-Kai to the human colony world called New Brisbane. Do not engage. Do not communicate. Simply open the doors and leave. The soldiers obeyed. They were too afraid to do anything else. As the transport jumped to faster-than-light speed, the Neth-Kai began to feed on each other, growing stronger with every meal. By the time they reached New Brisbane, the thousands had become hundreds, but each one was 1,000 times more deadly than before. The Dominion had unleashed their ultimate killer. They had no idea what would answer. On Earth, in a small apartment in a city called Mumbai, a young scientist named Priya Nair was preparing for a transfer to New Brisbane's orbital research station. She checked her equipment one final time, said goodbye to her family, and boarded the shuttle that would take her to her new assignment. She did not know that in 3 months, she would make the discovery that changed everything. She did not know that humanity's salvation would come not from strength or technology, but from a simple fact that Earth was the most terrifying planet the galaxy had ever produced. And she certainly did not know that the monsters coming for her species were about to learn a very old lesson. Sometimes the prey is far worse than the predator. Priya watched the world burn from 300 kilometers above it. New Brisbane had been a beautiful colony. Green forests, clean rivers, cities built with care and hope. 2 million people had called it home. Farmers, teachers, children, dreamers. They had crossed the stars to build something new. Now they were dead. The emergency broadcast had stopped 6 hours ago. The last transmission was a woman screaming for help while something wet and clicking moved in the background. Then silence. Priya had listened to that silence for a long time, unable to look away from her screens. The creatures below did not look like anything she had seen before. They moved in swarms, flowing across the landscape like living water. Some were small enough to fit in a pocket. Others were as large as buildings. They did not seem to have a fixed shape. They changed constantly, growing new limbs, absorbing materials, becoming whatever they needed to be. They were perfect, and they were fast. In 18 hours, they had consumed every human on the planet's surface. The underground shelters lasted another 12 hours before the creatures found ways to dig. After that, nothing. Priya's station commander, a tired man named Abbas, put his hand on her shoulder. The quarantine order just came through. No ships in or out. Admiral Rowe is mobilizing the home fleet, but it will be weeks before they arrive. Weeks, Priya repeated. These things killed 2 million people in 30 hours. In weeks, they will have reached Earth. I know. Priya looked at her instruments. She was a xenobiologist. Studying alien life was her entire purpose. And right now, every scientific instinct she had was screaming at her to learn more about these creatures. I need samples, she said. Abbas stared at her. Are you insane? Those things just ate a planet. Yes, and if we do not understand them, they will eat every other planet too. We need to know what they are, how they work, and how to stop them. She did not wait for permission. Priya ran to the probe bay and launched the smallest automated collector she could find. It dropped through the atmosphere, gathered tissue samples from a creature that was too busy feeding to notice, and returned to orbit before anything could catch it. The samples were contained in a triple-sealed chamber. Priya studied them for 3 days without sleeping. What she found made no sense. The creatures were not entirely biological. Parts of them were organic. Parts were mechanical. Parts were something else entirely, made of materials that should not exist in nature. They adapted to threats by changing their own structure at the molecular level. Weapons that hurt them once would never hurt them again. But that was not the strange part. The strange part was how they reacted to human biological material. Priya had placed samples of human blood, human skin, and human sweat inside the containment chamber to see how the creatures would respond. She expected them to attack immediately. Instead, they retreated to the far corner of the chamber and stayed there. They were afraid, not of the blood, not of the skin. They were afraid of something in the sweat. Specifically, they were afraid of the chemicals that human bodies produced when experiencing fear. Adrenaline, cortisol, the stress hormones that flooded a human system during moments of terror. The creatures were not just avoiding these chemicals. They were recoiling from them as if the chemicals were poison. Their movements became erratic. Their structure destabilized. One of the smaller specimens actually died. Priya ran the test 17 times. The result was always the same. The deadliest creatures in the galaxy were terrified of human fear. She reported her findings to a boss. He did not believe her at first. Then he saw the footage. "This does not make sense," he said. "Why would they be scared of fear?" "I do not know," Priya admitted. "But it gets stranger. I compared the chemical signature of human stress hormones to our database of known alien biochemistry. There is no match. Nothing else in the galaxy produces these exact compounds in these exact combinations." "What does that mean?" Priya hesitated. She had a theory, but it was so strange that she barely believed it herself. "I think," she said slowly, "that something in our evolutionary history made us produce chemicals that these creatures recognize as belonging to a predator. Not prey, a predator that hunted them, something they have not seen in millions or maybe billions of years." Abbas sat down heavily. "You're saying that humans smell like something that used to eat these monsters?" "Yes, and that is why they are afraid of us. Not of us, of our fear. The more afraid we are, the more we smell like whatever hunted them. To these creatures, a terrified human must seem like the most dangerous thing in the universe." Abbas looked at the screens, showing the devastated surface of New Brisbane. The creatures were still down there, feeding and growing. But Priya's discovery changed everything. The Dominion had sent their ultimate weapon to destroy humanity. Instead, humanity had discovered the weapon's one weakness. Now, they just needed to figure out how to use it. Priya transmitted her findings to Earth Command with a single recommendation. Find out what humans smell like when they're truly afraid. Find out how to make that fear stronger. And then show these creatures that they were right to be scared. The monsters had chosen the wrong prey, and humanity was about to remind them why. The defector arrived in chains. His name was Oris. He was small for a Dominion citizen, with pale gray scales and eyes that had seen too much. He had served the High Arbiter for 60 years before stealing a ship and fleeing toward human space. He surrendered immediately when human patrol ships found him. He did not try to fight. He simply transmitted a single message in broken English. "I know what they sent. I know why. I can help you survive." Now he sat in a sealed room aboard the carrier Relentless, surrounded by armed guards and scientists. Admiral Rowe watched from behind a transparent barrier while Priya explained her discovery. "Human fear chemicals cause the creatures to retreat," she said. "But I cannot explain why. The reaction is too specific, too extreme. There must be something in their history that makes them recognize these compounds as dangerous." Oris listened carefully. When Priya finished, he let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "You truly do not know," he said. "You have no idea what you are." Admiral Rowe leaned forward. "Explain." Oris closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet and sad. "The creatures are called Nethkai. We created them 2,000 years ago as weapons. They were designed to consume any organic species quickly and completely. But there was a problem. The Nethkai remembered something from before we made them. Something ancient." He opened his eyes. "Billions of years ago, before the Dominion existed, before most current species evolved, there was another civilization. They called themselves the Hollow Reapers. They ruled the galaxy not through technology or diplomacy. They ruled through pure terror." Priya felt cold. Terror. The Hollow Reapers were predators. True predators. They hunted other intelligent species for sport. They fed on fear. The chemicals that frightened prey produced were like food to them. The more afraid their victims were, the more the Reapers enjoyed the hunt. Oris paused. Eventually, the Reapers died out. No one knows why. Perhaps they consumed too much. Perhaps they turned on each other. But before they vanished, they left traces of themselves across the galaxy. Chemical signatures burned into the genetic memory of every species they hunted, including the ancestors of the Nethkai. Understanding hit Priya like a physical blow. The Nethkai remember the Reapers. Yes, the fear of the Hollow Reapers is written into their very cells. They cannot forget. They cannot ignore it. When they sense the chemical signature of a true predator, every instinct they have tells them to run. Admiral Rowe's voice was hard. And humans produce this signature. You do. I do not know how. Your species evolved on a single planet, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. You should have no connection to the Hollow Reapers. But somehow, your biochemistry matches theirs almost perfectly. Priya thought about Earth, about the constant struggle for survival that had shaped human evolution. The ice ages, the predators, the diseases, the wars. Humans had spent millions of years living in fear, fighting against extinction. Maybe that fear had changed them. Maybe it had made them into something that the galaxy had not seen in billions of years. We smell like monsters, she whispered. You smell like the only monsters the Nethkai have ever feared, Oris confirmed. To them, a frightened human is indistinguishable from a Hollow Reaper on the hunt. They cannot tell the difference. They can only run. Admiral Rowe stood up slowly. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were burning. Can we use this? Oris nodded. Yes. If you can increase the concentration of your fear chemicals, amplify the signal, you could drive the Nethkai away. You could make them flee from you instead of hunting you. How do we increase it? That is the difficult part. The chemicals are produced involuntarily. You cannot simply choose to be more afraid. You need people who have experienced extreme terror, people whose bodies have been conditioned to produce massive amounts of stress hormones, people who have faced death so many times that fear has become part of who they are. Priya thought of soldiers returning from war, survivors of disasters, people who woke screaming every night because their minds would not let them forget. People like her father, who had survived a mining accident that killed 30 of his co-workers. People like her grandmother, who had lived through a famine that took half her village. People who carried their trauma like weights around their necks. You need broken people, she said quietly. No, Admiral Rowe's voice was firm. We need survivors. We need the people who faced the worst and refused to die. And we need to ask them to face it again. He turned to his officers. Start recruiting. Find everyone who has lived through the kind of fear that leaves scars. Tell them what we are fighting. Tell them what we need. And tell them that for the first time in human history, their pain might save us all. Priya looked at Oris. Why did you defect? Why help us? The alien met her eyes. Because I was there when we voted to release the Nethkai. I saw what we were about to do to your species. And I realized that we were making a terrible mistake. We thought we were sending monsters to destroy you. We did not realize that you were the monsters all along. Deshi remembered the flood. He was 17 when the river broke through the dam and swallowed his village. He remembered the water coming like a wall of black glass. He remembered grabbing his little sister and running. He remembered the moment when the current pulled her from his arms and he could not hold on. He found her body 3 days later, tangled in the branches of a fallen tree. For years after that, Deshi could not sleep without seeing water. He became a rescue worker because he needed to save people. He needed to prove that survival meant something. He pulled bodies from collapsed buildings and burning vehicles. He held dying strangers and promised them that help was coming. He learned to function with fear as his constant companion. Now, that fear was going to save humanity. The training facility was hidden in the mountains of northern Canada. 300 volunteers had answered the call. Soldiers, first responders, accidents survivants, people who carried their trauma like armor. The doctors called them Reapers. Deshi trained alongside 2 others who would become his team. Ingrid was a combat medic from Norway. She had spent 7 years in war zones, watching people die while she fought to keep them alive. Rio was a young woman from Brazil who had survived a plane crash that killed everyone else on board. She was 22 years old, and she had not slept through the night since she was 19. The training was brutal. They were subjected to controlled terror, loud noises in dark rooms, simulated drowning, virtual reality scenarios designed to trigger their worst memories. The goal was not to overcome their fear. The goal was to control it. They learned to activate their stress response on command, to flood their bodies with adrenaline and cortisol at will, to become walking chemical weapons. Some volunteers broke. They were sent home with thanks and promises of support. Others adapted. They became something new. After 6 weeks, the first Reapers were ready for deployment. The Nethkai had taken Kepler Station. 40,000 survivors were trapped in the lower levels, running out of air and food. Traditional weapons had failed. Explosives only made the creatures angry. Energy weapons were absorbed and adapted to within minutes. But no one had tried fear. Deshi led the drop team. 12 Reapers in sealed suits, carrying no weapons except their own bodies. They fell through the station's shattered hull and landed in the middle of an infestation. The Nethkai were everywhere. They covered the walls and ceiling like living carpet. Hundreds of eyes and mouths turned toward the intruders. The creatures began to move, flowing toward the humans like a hungry tide. Deshi raised his hand. Now, the Reapers activated together. It was not a pleasant experience. They forced their bodies into panic states. Their hearts raced. Their breath came fast and shallow. Sweat poured from their skin, carrying the chemical signature of absolute terror. The effect on the Nethkai was immediate. The creatures froze. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the Nethkai began to shiver. Their bodies lost cohesion, becoming less solid, less organized. Strange sounds emerged from them, sounds that might have been screams. Then they ran. The swarms scattered in every direction, fleeing from the 12 humans who stood at the center of the corridor. Creatures that had just eaten through reinforced steel doors now cowered in corners, trying to make themselves small. Deshi walked forward. The Nethkai parted around him like water around stone. They would not touch him. They could not even look at him. Move to the survivors, he ordered. Keep the signal active. The rescue took 4 hours. 40,000 people were evacuated through corridors filled with trembling monsters. Not a single Nethkai attacked. They were too afraid. By the time the last transport left, the creatures had retreated to the deepest parts of the station. They stayed there, hiding in the dark, waiting for the terrible things that smelled like their ancient nightmares to go away. Ingrid found Deshi sitting alone after the mission. He was staring at his hands, watching them shake. "We did it," she said. "We saved them." "I know." His voice was empty, but I had to go back to the worst moment of my life to do it. I had to feel my sister slip away from me again. And again, and again. Ingrid sat beside him. She understood. They all understood. "Is it worth it?" she asked. Deshi thought about the faces of the people they had rescued. Children who would grow up. Parents who would see their families again. Lives that would continue because 12 broken humans had learned to weaponize their pain. "Yes," he said finally. "It has to be." The news spread across human space within hours. Video footage showed the Nethkai fleeing from unarmed humans. The creatures that had consumed New Brisbane, that had been declared unstoppable by every military analyst, were running from people. Hope returned to worlds that had already accepted their deaths. The Dominion heard too. They watched the footage in silence. High Arbiter Solace broke 3 displays before his rage finally cooled. The humans were not dying. They were winning. And the Nethkai, the ultimate weapon, had become nothing more than frightened prey. Something would have to be done. The Dominion was burning. Solace received reports from across his empire, each one worse than the last. Nethkai swarms were appearing on colony worlds that had never seen humans. The creatures were fleeing human space, and they were hungry. The Dominion's perfect weapon had turned against its masters. "They're avoiding the humans," Counselor Veth reported, his voice trembling. "They will not go near any world where humans are present. So they're coming to us instead. 37 worlds have fallen in the past month. Our people are being consumed by the very weapon we created." Solace said nothing. His claws dug into the arms of his throne until they drew blood. "We must ally with the humans," another counselor suggested. "They're the only ones who can stop this. If we offer peace, perhaps they will help us." "Never." Solace's voice was ice. "We do not beg lesser species for mercy. We will find another way." Counselor Mira stepped forward. She was the one who had first suggested releasing the Nethkai. The weight of that decision showed in every line of her face. "There is no other way," she said quietly. "I made a terrible mistake. We all did. The humans are not lesser than us. They never were. They survived a world that should have killed them. They became predators in a galaxy full of prey. And now they're the only force in existence that the Nethkai fear. We have to ask for help. Solace moved faster than anyone could react. His blade was in Myra's chest before she finished speaking. She looked at him with dying eyes that held no surprise. Traitor, Solace hissed. We will never surrender to humans. But the other counselors were already backing away. They had seen the reports. They knew what was coming. And they knew that Solace's pride would kill them all. 3 days later, Solace was found dead in his chambers. The council announced that he had taken his own life in shame. No one believed it. No one cared. The new High Arbiter sent a message to Earth within the hour. Meanwhile, Deshi led his team to the Nethkai breeding world. Intelligence had located the source of the swarms, a planet called Hollow's Rest, named for its connection to the ancient Reapers. Deep underground, vast chambers produced new Nethkai by the millions. As long as those chambers remained active, the creatures would keep coming. The assault was the largest Reaper operation yet. 200 enhanced humans dropped onto a world crawling with nightmares. Their mission was simple. Go underground. Find the breeding chambers. Destroy them. Simple did not mean easy. The Nethkai on Hollow's Rest were different from those on other worlds. They were older, stronger, more resistant to the fear signal. They still retreated from the Reapers, but they did not flee. They watched from the shadows, waiting for weakness. Rio was the first to falter. Her stress response failed during the descent into the deepest chamber. The trauma that fueled her power suddenly became too much. She collapsed, screaming, lost in memories of burning wreckage and the smell of jet fuel. The Nethkai sensed weakness immediately. They surged forward. Ingrid threw herself over Rio's body, activating her signal at maximum strength. The creatures hesitated, caught between fear and hunger. Deshi added his own signal to hers, and slowly, painfully, the swarm backed away. But Rio was badly injured. A creature had reached her before the signals drove it off. Its touch had left wounds that would not stop bleeding. Go, Rio whispered. Finish the mission. I will be fine. You are not fine, Ingrid said. Then I will die doing something that matters. Go. Deshi made the hardest decision of his life. He left Ingrid with Rio and led the remaining Reapers deeper. The breeding chambers were vast. Living walls pulsed with the growth of millions of unborn Nethkai. At the center stood something ancient, a creature larger than anything Deshi had ever seen. The progenitor, the original template from which all Nethkai had been cloned. It looked at Deshi with intelligence in its eyes, and it did not run. You are not them, the progenitor said. Its voice came from everywhere at once. You smell like the hunters, but you are not the hunters. You're something else. Deshi raised his hand to activate his signal. The progenitor's voice stopped him. I know fear, it said. I have known it for billions of years. The hunters took everything from us. They turned us into this. Weapons. Consumers. We were not always monsters. You killed 2 million people on New Brisbane, Deshi replied. Yes, because we are hungry. Because we do not know how to be anything else. The hunters made us this way. And now you, who smell like hunters but are not hunters, have come to kill us too. Deshi felt something unexpected. Pity. This creature was ancient beyond comprehension, but it was also a victim. Created as a weapon. Used as a tool. Discarded when it became inconvenient. Just like the Reapers themselves. The charges were set. The breeding chambers would be destroyed. The Nethkai threat would end here. But as Deshi looked into the progenitor's ancient eyes, he realized that simple destruction was not enough. There had to be another way. Deshi lowered his hand. The charges were ready. One signal, and the breeding chambers would be destroyed. The Nethkai threat would end in fire. It was the logical choice. The safe choice. But Deshi had stopped believing in safe choices a long time ago. You said the hunters made you this way, he said to the progenitor. What were you before? The ancient creature was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was different. Softer. Almost sad. We were caretakers. We tended to worlds. We helped life grow. The hunters found us and saw potential. They twisted our purpose. Made us consume instead of nurture. Made us destroy instead of create. Can you go back? Can you be what you were before? I do not know. It has been so long. The hunger is all I remember. Deshi thought about his own hunger. The need to save people that had driven him since his sister died. The fear that had shaped him into a weapon. The trauma that defined his every waking moment. He had been twisted too, used as a tool, taught that his pain had value only because it could hurt others. But he was still human, still capable of choice. Maybe the Nethkai were too. Deshi sat down on the floor of the breeding chamber. The progenitor watched him with confusion. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to tell you a story," Deshi said, "about a boy who lost his sister in a flood, about the guilt he carried for years, about how he became a monster to fight monsters." "Why?" "Because the hunters never talked to you. They never saw you as anything except prey. And I think that is why you became what you are. No one ever showed you another way." The progenitor said nothing, but did not look away. Deshi talked for hours. He told the progenitor about New Brisbane, about the 2 million people who died, about the faces he saw in his nightmares. He talked about Ingrid and Rio, about the cost of becoming a Reaper, about the pain that never went away. And then he talked about his daughter. She was 3 years old. He had left her on Earth to fight this war. Every night, before a mission, he looked at her picture and promised himself that he would come home. He fought not for revenge or glory, but because he wanted to see her grow up. "I am afraid," Deshi admitted. "All the time. I am afraid of dying. I am afraid of failing. I am afraid of becoming something my daughter would not recognize. But I keep going because fear is not the end. It is just the beginning." The progenitor was trembling, not from fear, from something else. "You are strange creatures," it whispered. "You carry so much pain, yet you do not let it consume you. You use it. You transform it into something else. We call hope," Deshi said. "It is messy and painful, and sometimes it feels impossible. But it is the thing that separates us from monsters. I have not felt hope in billions of years. Would you like to try?" Silence filled the chamber. The unborn Nethkai pulsed in their walls, waiting for a command that might never come. Deshi did not move. He simply waited. Finally, the progenitor spoke. "The hunters took everything from us. I have hated them for so long. And you smell like them. You should be my enemy. But you sat down. You talked to me. You told me about your daughter. The hunters never did that. They only took. You are the first being in billions of years to give me something." The progenitor's massive form began to shift. It became smaller, less threatening, almost gentle. "Tell me more about hope," it said. "Show me how to remember." Deshi smiled. It was the first real smile he had worn in months. "I will. And in return, you stop the swarms. You call them home. You teach them that there is another way. Is it that simple?" "No, nothing is simple. But we could try together." The war ended not with explosions, but with conversation. The Nethkai swarms stopped attacking. They retreated to Hollow's Rest and entered a new kind of stasis. Not death, but transformation. The progenitor began the long work of remembering what its species had once been. The Dominion's empire shattered, but from its ruins rose the Galactic Accord, an alliance of species committed to cooperation instead of conquest. Humanity took its place among the stars not as rulers, but as protectors. Priya became the Accord's first xenobiology director. She spent her years studying the Nethkai's transformation, documenting the slow return of their caretaker nature. Oris served as ambassador between species, helping old enemies become new friends. He often said that defecting was the best decision he ever made. Rio recovered from her wounds and became a trainer for new Reapers. She taught them that their trauma was not a weakness, but a gift. Ingrid retired to a small colony where she grew vegetables and helped local children learn first aid. She said she had seen enough war for 10 lifetimes. And Deshi went home. His daughter was 5 when he returned. She ran into his arms and asked him where he had been. He told her he had been making friends with monsters. She laughed and said that sounded like a good story. It was. The Dominion had sent their ultimate killer to destroy humanity. They expected fear to be humanity's weakness. They never imagined that fear was only the beginning. In the end, humanity answered with something far worse than violence. They answered with compassion, and that made all the difference.